Our story begins with an Alaskan Malamute running across the Antarctic terrain. A Norwegian helicopter is in hot pursuit. One of the Norwegians shoots at the dog but misses every shot. R.J. McCready is introduced as he plays chess against a computer while drinking alcohol. The computer checkmates him, so he calls it a cheating female dog and pours his alcohol into it. The dog makes it to the American research camp as the crew begin to stir from the commotion. As the Norwegian helicopter lands, the crew of Americans gather outside to see what is going on. The Norwegian accidentally blows up his helicopter with a bomb he intended for the dog. The second Norwegian accidentally shoots Bennings in his attempt to kill the dog. It runs towards the entrance to the American camp and he follows. However, he is shot dead by Gary, the camp's commander. The team puts out the fire and Bennings' injury is tended to. They then reflect on what just happened, wondering why the Norwegians behaved so strangely. McCready and Dr. Copper decide to take their helicopter and inspect the Norwegian camp before the brewing storm gets any worse. It's a flight that will take them several hours. The dog watches them all from afar. The radio operator, Windows, notes how the brewing storm is interfering with communications and that he is unable to contact anyone. Bennings, irritated from being shot, demands Knowles to turn his music down. Knowles says he will, but doesn't. The dog makes its way down a hallway and slips into the open doorway of an unknown man who is alone. McCready and Copper arrive at the Norwegian camp, which is in ruins. Shotgun in hand, the pair make their way through the decrepit halls, searching for answers. Dr. Copper finds a portable video unit and takes it. A blood trail leads them to a body frozen on a chair. The body belongs to a man whose throat and wrist have been slit wide open. Amazingly, the knife is in his frozen hand, almost as if he had done the act to himself. After they find a large cube of ice with its middle hollowed out, they decide to leave. On their way out, they discover a vaguely humanoid mass of charred and warped flesh frozen outside, which they wrap up and take with them back to their camp. Arriving back at their camp, an autopsy on the pile of warped flesh reveals that despite its appearance, its organs are entirely human. At Bennings' request, Clark takes the dog to the pen where the other dogs are kept and turns the light off. As the dogs are left alone, the new dog sits eerily still. The other dogs begin barking furiously as the new dog's face bursts open. Tentacles and legs sprout from its body as the dogs begin to whimper and yelp in fear. Clark hears the commotion and approaches the pen. However, the light has been broken. He opens the pen door and several dogs come rushing out. He manages to get the gate closed before the creature's tentacles can grab him. The noises this creature emits can best be described as a mixture of a whine and a roar. Hearing the hauntingly inhuman noise, McCready rushes to the fire alarm and pulls it to alert the entire crew. Everyone regroups outside the pen with guns and flamethrowers. They stare in horror and shock at what used to be a normal dog. Its tentacles continue spreading to every remaining dog in the pen. McCready shoots it multiple times, but it does nothing. In response, it grows massive clawed hands and tries to escape through the roof. The man with the flamethrower, Childs, steps in and lights the creature on fire, which appears much more effective as it falls back to the ground, screeching loudly. The next day, Blair does an autopsy of the creature, which reveals that it was absorbing the other dogs in the pen and replicating their cells perfectly in some kind of form of imitation. The reason it failed is because they caught it before it had time to fully assimilate the other dogs. Reviewing the portable footage unit Copper brought back, the team realizes the Norwegians had discovered something in the ice north of their camp. Despite the storm getting worse, McCready and two others make their way to the coordinates from the video unit and discover what appears to be a massive spaceship. Their scanners indicate it to be at least 100,000 years old, if not older. They also discover a carved-out chunk of ice, perfectly matching the hollowed-out ice chunk at the Norwegian camp. Making it back to camp, McCready theorizes the spaceship crashed on Earth, and when something crawled out of the ship, it froze. He says the Norwegians discovered whatever froze into the ice and brought it back to their camp, where it then thawed and attacked them. Childs remains skeptical while Palmer sarcastically remarks that this kind of thing happens all the time. Blair runs tests and makes some haunting discoveries. The earlier autopsy theory is confirmed as he watches an alien cell perfectly imitate a dog cell and spread. His computer calculates there is a 75% chance one or more of them are infected, and it also calculates all of humanity would become infected in just a few years if the alien escaped Antarctica. Windows and Bennings move the warped body to a storage room, and then Windows leaves to fetch the keys from Gary. Fuchs talks to MacReady alone, informing him Blair has locked himself in his room and that his notebooks state there is still molecular activity in the burnt remains, meaning the creature is still alive. Windows returns to the storage room to find Bennings being assimilated by the creature. Windows runs for help and sets off the alarm. They return to find the creature had broken out through the window. Catching up to it, they surround it as it lifts its head to them. It glares at them and roars as MacReady sets it on fire. They surround the remains in a makeshift foxhole and finish it off with more gas and a flamethrower. MacReady watches Blair run from the helicopter and discovers he sabotaged it. MacReady hears shots being fired and runs inside. Blair is extremely aggressive and panicked. He is destroying their radio station and shoots at anyone who tries to stop him. He has also killed the remaining dogs and sabotaged most of their vehicles. Childs peeks around a corner and tries to reason with Blair, saying that Blair is not the type of man to kill them in cold blood. Blair responds by unloading his entire revolver at Childs, who managed to duck back behind the wall. With no more rounds left, the team rushes and subdues Blair. They lock him in the tool shed, and he simply states he does not know who to trust. Next, they decide a blood test could help them determine who is human and who is not. However, when they get to the blood samples, they realize someone sabotaged the samples. They get into a heated argument over who could have sabotaged the blood. Windows panics and runs for the gun storage and retrieves a shotgun. However, the team follows him and gets him to drop his gun. They decide to make MacReady the new leader, so he takes Gary's revolver. Then they burn the blood samples outside. MacReady decides to isolate Dr. Copper, Clark, and Gary from the rest. He orders Norris and Childs to tie them up and give them morphine. This is met with some resistance, but MacReady points a flamethrower at them and forces them. While this is being done, MacReady records a tape in case he dies. He states the situation and also theorizes that the torn clothing discovered earlier indicates someone else is not human. Later that night, Fuchs is alone in his office when the power shuts off. He sees a figure glide past his doorway. For some reason, he decides following it alone outside is the best idea. Making his way outside, he discovers MacReady's shredded jacket. Windows, MacReady, and Knowles go searching for Fuchs and find a pile of charred remains. They theorize he either accidentally burned himself alive while trying to fight one of the things, or he did it on purpose so he wouldn't be assimilated. Windows returns inside to inform everyone else, while Knowles and MacReady decide to inspect MacReady's shack because the light is on despite MacReady not leaving it on before. They begin barricading the facility, and Norris hunches over in pain from his chest. 40 minutes pass as everyone begins to worry. Suddenly, Knowles bursts through the door, saying he ran from MacReady once he found the torn jacket with MacReady's name and claiming he was an imitation. The door handle begins to slowly turn, but Childs blocks the door from opening. As they argue over whether or not they should open the door and light MacReady on fire, they hear a window break in a nearby storage room as MacReady breaks in. They rush to the room and break down the locked door. They find MacReady holding a flare up to a pack of potent explosives. He threatens them into lowering their weapons. Norris and Knowles try to disarm him from behind, but fail. Norris has a heart attack and stops breathing, so they rush him to the clinic and untie Dr. Copper and the others to help him. MacReady continues to hold the explosives and a flamethrower as Dr. Copper renders aid to Norris. Just as tension builds and MacReady and the crew begin arguing, Norris's chest opens up like a jagged mouth and clamps down on Copper's arms. Copper reels backwards, screaming in pain and dying from blood loss. Everyone rushes behind MacReady for protection as a mass of flesh rises out of Norris's open chest. It clings to the ceiling with makeshift appendages as its vaguely human head roars at them. MacReady burns the body as Norris's head detaches from the body. Growing its own legs, it tries to flee. However, the crew spots it and MacReady burns it. In the next room, MacReady holds everyone hostage, stating that seeing how Norris's body reacted to CPR gave him a new idea to discover who is human and who is not. Clark tries to rush him with a knife, so MacReady shoots him. Palmer, Gary, and Childs are tied down as he begins to initiate the test. First, he tests Window's blood and his own blood, both of which have no reaction to the hot copper wire. The blood of the corpses of Clark and Copper also have no reaction. Childs and Gary begin to protest and call the test bogus as MacReady picks up Palmer's blood sample. As MacReady lowers the hot wire into Palmer's blood, it screeches and reacts to the heat. Palmer begins to shake and morph into a monster as Gary and Childs scream at MacReady to kill it. MacReady tries, but his flamethrower malfunctions. As the creature leaps to the ceiling, he screams at Windows to light it on fire. Windows tries, but the creature's face splits open and clasps down on Windows' head. It throws Windows' body against a table. Just then, MacReady gets his flamethrower to work and lights the thing on fire, which runs through the wall into the snow. MacReady finishes it off with an explosive and then lights Windows' body on fire, which squirms and groans like a monster. Everyone else's blood has no reaction to the hot needle, so MacReady sets them all free. They venture to the tool shed to test Blair's blood, while Childs stays behind. They arrive to find Blair missing and a large hole underneath some loose floorboards. The tunnel opens up into a cave where Blair was building some kind of makeshift spacecraft. From the toolshed entrance, Nall sees Childs leave the facility and informs the others. Just then, the power shuts off with the path lights being the only light left. They determine Blair had gotten back into the facility and sabotaged the generator. MacReady says it wants to freeze and wait for a rescue team to find it. They decide to stop the creature by destroying the entire base. They make their way to the generator room, using Molotovs on the rooms they pass by. Gary confirms the generator cannot be fixed, so they decide to plant explosives. Incredibly, they decide splitting up and planting their explosives separately is a good idea. Blair ambushes Gary and holds his mouth shut as he assimilates him. Knowles gets suspicious and goes looking for Gary. MacReady finishes setting up the detonator only to find himself now alone. He calls for them but gets no response. Just as he lights some dynamite, the ground explodes as something rushes towards him from underneath the floor. He leaps out of the way as the ground opens up. A pair of tentacles grabs the detonator and pulls it underground. Just then, a massive monster rises out of the ground. It roars at MacReady with a gaping mouth. Its body opens up as what appears to be some kind of dog hybrid begins crawling out. MacReady throws the dynamite he lit and runs. The entire camp explodes as all the planted dynamite detonates. MacReady makes it out in time and sits down in the ruins of a nearby shed. Childs finds MacReady and they have a suspenseful exchange. Childs says he saw Blair and went after him but got lost. They know that once the fire dies down, they will freeze. So they share a drink and seemingly accept their fate. And that is the end of today's tale. Thank you for stopping by Recapiverse. Be sure to comment any thoughts you have down below. I would also be very appreciative for any likes or subscriptions given. If you made it this far, thank you, and as always, stay safe, watch out, and take care.